So good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining our fourth Request for Applications webinar. And we'd like to give just a few more minutes before we get started. So if you wouldn't mind holding on the line, we would appreciate it. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for joining the Native American Agriculture Fund Request for Applications webinar number 4. So today will be a little bit different from our previous sessions. Now, our goal is to do a cut down walkthrough of our slides, just to provide everyone more room for questions and answers. To view the full version of this PowerPoint and previously recorded webinars, we encourage you to visit www.nativeamericanagriculturefund.org/grants. Again, that is www.nativeamericanagriculturefund.org/grants. So if you have any issues accessing this webinar, please let us know in the chat box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, or you're more than welcome to give us a call at 479-445-6226, and our number is 479-445-6226. And we also welcome the opportunity to answer your questions. That's the primary purpose of our discussion here today. So for those of you joining us virtually, you're more than welcome to ask us questions through the question box and your GoToWebinar taskbar. We are also available Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Central Time by calling 479-445-6226 or by emailing us at grants@nativeamericanagriculturefund.org. I want to read that email one more time for you. So that is grants@nativeamericanagriculturefund.org. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome our CEO of the Native American Agriculture Fund, Janie Hipp.
Hello, everybody. So it is September 17th. So I just want to let you know, first of all, that we're happy that you joined us on this last webinar. I'll reiterate what Josiah just shared with you. Don't hesitate to go to our website. We have all of the materials that you need for considering and for studying before you actually put your application into the system. What we're going to do today, we're not going to go over the entire big set of PowerPoint slides. Those you can access off the website and download. I hope that you've already done that and are kind of considering which avenue you want to take to respond to the request for applications. We felt like today might be better off since we've gone through the full slide deck at least 3 times so far. in our previous webinars, that we would just do a trimmed down version of that, just kind of hit the high points, but then actually open up the floor for as many questions as you want to pose to us. But again, as Josiah shared, please don't hesitate to use our email or just give us a call if you've got any kind of questions at all. The other thing I wanted to share with you is after I walk through some of the early information, Tony's going to take it over and kind of walk through some of the technical aspects of getting into the software platform to submit your application. But if you pose a question to us that is very, very technical in nature and we need to consult with our software provider, then we will do that and get right back to you. So again, we will let you know when the Q&A part comes up of this webinar. If it gets really technical and we need to pull in our software folks, we can do that. We're also going to take one last look at all the questions that we get for today and update the FAQs, the frequently asked questions, on our website. So be sure and take a look at that later this week. It'll give us 24, 48 hours to actually get those updated, but we will turn those around very quickly. If for some reason between now and September 30, the deadline for receiving your applications, if for some reason we get some new question that nobody's ever thought of before, then we'll update the FAQs again. So just keep going back if you have a question, or just send us an email at the grants at nativeamericanagriculturefund.org email, and we'll get back to you, or just pick up the phone. So anyway, I'm just going to run into that, into the actual content now. So again, please make note on your calendar that the request for application closes. We need all applications either postmarked if you're going to do a written application, typewritten, and submit it via some sort of carrier service or the mail. Or if you're going to use the preferred system, which is the online process, then please know that you've got to be in that system and have pressed submit before the 11:59 p.m. Central Time time frame on September the 30th. Just be mindful that if you haven't started your registration process, go ahead and get that done now. You can, and Tony will walk you through this too, you can go ahead and start working on it and the system will save it automatically. So it is possible to kind of visit that system time and time again until you get it the way you want it. So just be mindful of the rapidly approaching deadline. So first of all, thanks for being on this call with us, but also thank you for considering submitting an application for this first request for application process that NAAF is going through. We're very honored that you're considering that, and we are looking forward to reading everyone's application, no matter whether it's submitted online or submitted through written means. If it does come in through written means, rest assured we will use our staff and submit it into the system in the online for you. But we need to have your written application in hand in order to do that. So eligible grant recipients for, and this is covered in the actual trust agreement that governs how Native American Agriculture Fund is allowed to do business. We did extract some of the early slides in the full slide deck that talk about how we got to this point and how NAAF was actually created. You're welcome to study those at length. You can also, on our website, you can actually also pull down and copy and study the trust agreement itself. So much of the information I'm going to send to you, talk with you about today comes directly from the trust agreement. But when NAAF actually puts this request for applications out there to the public, we're governed by the types of eligible entities, the eligible grant recipients that are outlined in the trust agreement. And we're also governed by the types of projects that can be funded. And so we're going to be going into that right now. But one of the first questions you need to ask yourself is, are you an eligible grant recipient under the terms of the trust agreement? As required by the trust agreement in Section 8A, eligible grant recipients are nonprofit organizations with IRS 501c3 tax-exempt status. But if such status has not yet been achieved, and if you are in process of that, you'll know that it requires an application form that goes into the IRS, and then the IRS studies that application and determines whether you will be granted 501c3 status. They will let you know in writing when that happens. But if you have not achieved that status yet, then you can still apply for funding through a fiscal sponsor that has received 501c3 tax-exempt status. So just know that one of the early decisions that was made when the settlement agreement and the trust agreement were actually being negotiated was that new organizations would be allowed to participate in the NAAF grant making process. But just understand that the trust agreement is very specific that you can do so, but through a fiscal sponsor. The second type of eligible grant recipient is educational organizations. And those are the ones of the types that are described in Section 170B1A2 of the Internal Revenue Code. That's very specifically set out in the trust agreement itself. The third type of organization that's an eligible grant recipient are community development financial institutions, CDFIs, which includes certified native CDFIs and emerging native CDFIs, provided, however, that the CDFI is a tax-exempt organization described in Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code. The fourth type of eligible grant recipients, and this is described also in the trust agreement in Section 8A, are instrumentalities of state or federally recognized tribes, including nonprofit organizations chartered under the tribal law of a state or federally recognized tribe. And the entity, the instrumentality, furnishes assistance designed to further Native American farming or ranching activities. And then the trust agreement goes on to say that provided, however, that the use of the grant funds by the grant recipient is restricted exclusively to charitable and educational purposes, the grant recipient is required to annually provide NAAF with audited financial statements and reports that we might require, that the grant recipient, if they're a governmental entity, they are required under the terms of the trust agreement itself to provide a limited waiver of sovereign immunity with respect to NAAF's right to enforce the terms of the grant. In other words, that limited waiver of sovereign immunity will cover the amount of funding awarded. And then finally, the grant recipient has to agree to comply with expenditure responsibility requirements that NAAF may impose. Grants to fiscal sponsors, as I said, are allowed, and we're happy to entertain those. We've gotten several questions over the course of the last several weeks in this particular area. So we're thinking that we actually might see quite a few new organizations that haven't achieved 501c3 status, but that are working through fiscal sponsors. So just as a matter of sort of technical advice, I'd share with you that you need to be finding your fiscal sponsor now, and they need to be very well versed in the actual request for applications, and you need to be sitting down and visiting with them about who's going to be responsible for pushing send on these submitted applications. So all of those details, I would tell you, since it is the 17th and these are due on the 30th, that you should have those underway already or get them underway quickly. Verification of eligibility is required. It's up to the applicant, you all, to provide documentation that proves you're eligible under one of those 4 categories that I just described. And also you must serve native farmers and ranchers. And the way the Board of Trustees and our team here at the headquarters, we are taking the broadest possible description of farmer and rancher possible. And it is meant to include farmers of all types of food and fiber products and ranchers of all types of livestock. And both this application process as well as the fast track funding process that occurred previously. Some of you may be aware, a lot of you may be aware of that process. Those funds have already gone out, but those also included fishers and fisheries in potential applications that we are welcoming in and happy to receive. So. Allowable use of funds. The applicants receiving funds are required to use the funds to provide services to native farmers and ranchers, including those who are seeking to become farmers and ranchers, and to support and promote farmers and ranchers' continued engagement in agriculture. The trust agreement is also very specific about the types of areas in which funding can be provided. And although the trust agreement itself is very specific about these 4 areas in that second bullet, you can also realize by reading those terms that are before you that those areas are quite broad in and of themselves. So just be creative as you're thinking about how to put together a project in one of these key areas. But the key areas include business assistance, agricultural education, technical support, and advocacy. And we'll get into a little bit of these as we roll along on these slides. The trust agreement also controls the eligible uses, the eligible entities that I talked about previously. We are not allowed under the trust agreement as NAAF, the organization, to provide grant funding directly to individual native farmers and ranchers, nor can we provide loans to individual native farmers and ranchers. I'm sure most of you on the phone wouldn't be surprised for me to tell you that we've already received inquiries from individual native farmers and ranchers, both for either a grant or a loan. But the trust agreement does not give us the flexibility to do that. We are required to work through one of the 4 types of eligible recipients, eligible entities. Those eligible entities, the 4, which, as a reminder, 501c3s or their fiscal sponsors, state or federally recognized tribal governments, educational organizations, or CDFIs. They then, though, can turn around and provide grants to other entities and to individual native farmers and ranchers, or they can provide loans. So just understand that it works in that way. We're not allowed to have direct loans or grants to individuals, but you can as an eligible entity. The funds can be used for projects that are up to 24 months, 2 years in duration. If you want to submit an application for a smaller amount of time, please feel free to do so. But we are looking for a cap at this point on projects that would extend over up to 2 years. They can be used for project support, for scholarships, for re-grants, for loans, and for capital expenditures. But we'll go into the budget issues in just a little bit. Funding for the programs that strictly meet the emphasis areas for this particular request for application process will be given the higher priority over just a general application that doesn't really speak to any of the topic areas in this year's funding application. Non-eligible entities or projects include entities that do not provide business assistance, ag education, technical support, or advocacy to native farmers and ranchers, They work outside the U.S. They perhaps are projects that don't provide assistance designed to further the success of native farming and ranching, or provide resources designed to further that success by the individuals who are involved in farming and ranching, or projects that seek funding predominantly to provide outreach on USDA programs and services. We are of the opinion that USDA has its own funding mechanisms to actually push out and provide outreach on its programs and services, and NAAF funds should not be used to do what USDA is already supposed to be doing. Other examples of non-eligible entities or projects include projects that might assist an individual native farmer or rancher, but are not services that are agriculture related. So we really want you to drive into the agricultural focus of this particular, of what these funds are all about. We also consider non-eligible entities or projects that would be those that involve use of funds that are not designed to do charitable and educational purposes under the description of those terms in the Internal Revenue Code, or funds that will be used to provide direct financial assistance to native farmers and ranchers in natural disaster problems. As you all know, we are facing more and more of that as we go along, but USDA does have programs that provide for natural disaster assistance, and we encourage you to if you're working with native farmers and ranchers, please think about helping them to access those USDA resources. We, at this point, are not going to be using NAAF funds for disaster-related purposes. We also, if you actually read the trust agreement closely, you'll see that we are not allowed to use funds for litigation purposes. However, if you have followed this issue at all, you'll know that many native farmers and ranchers and non-native farmers and ranchers have need for legal services all day long. They're constantly thinking about entering into agreements and contracts or needing things legally interpreted. So it is possible to actually seek funds for general education legal purposes that do not involve litigation. So just be mindful about that prohibition that's in the trust agreement, that our funds are not allowed to be used for litigation. The funds should also not be used for direct lobbying or political activities as defined by the IRS, which includes efforts to influence legislation. However, there are lots of other forms of advocacy that are allowable under the description of that entire area and that entire prohibition that the IRS has put in place over time. So entities that are also educational organizations but don't have an established record of working with, by, and through native farmers and ranchers are not eligible for funding unless they partner with a native controlled educational organization such as a TCU. And such native controlled educational organization must be in the lead as an applicant on the project. What we're trying to get at here is that although educational organizations are eligible entities, we very much value the work of those organizations that might fall into that category that have actually worked with native farmers or ranchers, or who are willing to partner and put in the lead those organizations that have history in working with native farmers and ranchers and working in Indian country more broadly. So while they're generally eligible, we really are going to be focusing on further analysis of their eligibility based on their track record and based on their involvement with our communities. Entities that have received fast track funding, and you know who you are, there were 34 organizations that received fast track funding that went out towards the end of last year. that was decided previously back in 2016, but was finally approved to be released in 2018. The fast track funding recipients are eligible to actually apply for this round, but they have to seek funding for new projects or continuations of the work that was funded earlier, but those funds have run out and they wish to continue that work. So just be mindful that if you are a fast track funding recipient organization, you're not prohibited from putting in a new or a continuation application this time around in 2019. We are also not allowed to consider applications by entities that are community-based organizations that don't squarely meet the definitions of eligible entities. There are so many community-based groups that are out there that are doing amazing work, but our trust agreement is very specific and all of its terms were negotiated in the settlement of the Keep Siegel case some years back, and as such we are restricted in that sense. So please, if you're a community-based organization and you're out there doing amazing work, consider partnering with a 501c3 or some other eligible entity of those 4 types. We also are very mindful that the Keep Siegel case itself was based on access to credit issues. And so funding for programs that strictly meet the emphasis areas for the 2019 request for application will be given the highest priority for funding, but we also are definitely looking for things for applications that get to these core issues of access to credit. So additional consideration when we evaluate the applications will be given to those entities that have as one of their specific targeted outcomes the improvement of access to credit by Native farmers and ranchers. Applications that combine focus areas are just fine, but here's where you need to put your creativity hat on and really think about what it is you're trying to do where you are and within your community, and really think strategically about how and if you want to combine any particular focus area. Value-added agriculture is one of those areas that inherently on its own tends to be more of a combination sort of an approach to things. But value-added agriculture, as we define it for this request for application in our particular focus areas, includes all types of processes by which value is added to raw agricultural products or raw hunted and gathered products. So value-added agriculture is one of those areas of a lot of potential growth for native agriculture, and we encourage you to think creatively about that in terms of putting your application together. And we do take the broadest definition into play when considering what you put forward. So please be as descriptive as possible about what it is you're trying to do in the value-added arena. Solid educational information is so needed by so many people, and we very much consider and find important the educational and advocacy components in the development of policies. It's really hard to develop strong legislative policies, no matter whether you're at the tribal government level or at Congress, without a solid background for education of all the various components that might go into good policy. So please know that particularly in the advocacy arena, if you're proposing a project there, to really think strategically about the educational backup that has to occur alongside those advocacy focused projects. The other thing to think about, please, if you're an educational institution, particularly if you're a degree granting entity, please think about the need to drive into the space of agricultural sciences and those sorts of teaching, training, and education programs that really provide the support to native farmers and ranchers and drive us into developing a stronger and a deeper bench, as I like to call it, for agricultural folks around Indian country. We need a lot of folks in these areas, and so just think creatively and broadly if you're thinking about an educational focus grant application. CDFIs are one of our priority funding areas. As I've talked previously, they are one of the 4 types of identified eligible entities in the trust agreement itself. We are seeking, if you've downloaded and you've kind of studied the request for applications for this year, you'll note that that CDFIs are one of our 4 primary priority funding areas. So take a look at that. This is kind of an area in our slides today, because we are doing a shortened version, that you might want to actually go through the deeper version of our slide deck. But I just wanted to quickly highlight the priority funding areas and the special emphasis funding areas that we're asking you to take a look at when developing your proposals. So we are setting aside funding for CDFIs. So take a look at the very specific components of that in the full request for applications. They're not required to provide any particular, can you go back, any particular percentage of the available pool for lending to native farmers and ranchers, but just know that you should have demonstrated some kind of activity or need in this particular lending area. A lot of native CDFIs are finding that they have more and more applications for loans in the agricultural arena. So you don't have to have actually done that yet, but as a part of your work, but you should think about how you would demonstrate a kind of present need, but lack of funding right now on your part when you're describing your project. For educational institutions, again, we're looking for those that meet the clear definition of an educational organization. But we are, in this particular 2019 request for applications, we're looking for things that fall into the category of advanced agricultural business classroom training. Or that could also be online training, because many classrooms are not in the physical classroom anymore, they're online. So don't worry about that component at all. But what we are trying to drive into is the agricultural business component. We are also interested in applications from those educational organizations that are already doing ag business, but that are pushing off into ag business training. The training can be made available to native students of the educational organization, can be provided as a certificate program or a degree-seeking program. We've listed in this particular slide deck, and we listed in the request for applications itself. This is not a full list, but there are a lot of areas that kind of fall under the ag business umbrella. That can be economics, financing, marketing, hedging, futures, trading, business entity selection, risk management, food safety, agricultural law and policy, supply chain, logistics, or any related advanced agricultural business area. So just kind of get creative in that particular arena. 501c3 organizations are one of the other priority funding areas. Those, we're seeking applications more in a general context from 501c3s. Any type of project that's allowable under the framework for this particular request for applications, let me remind you, they should drive into those areas of business assistance, advocacy, agricultural education or technical support. We do need the nonprofit organizations that apply to provide proof that they're currently serving native farmers and ranchers. You do need to reflect the percentage of your larger portfolio if you do a lot of different things within your 501c3. Reflect the percentage of your bigger set of portfolio of activities that are focused just on the needs of native farmers and ranchers. There's more descriptive terminology in the request itself. So just take a look at that if you have any lingering questions. Another of our 4 priority funding areas is for tribal governments or instrumentalities of tribal governments. Those are specifically described in the slide in the past. This is where, in this particular priority funding area for 2019, we are looking at the narrow area of value-added agricultural enterprise development. You know, many times folks within tribal governments, you know, are very interested in what they can do to add value to the agricultural production that's already happening within their communities, or that they want to push out into that area. Anytime anyone is trying to conceive of an idea and put legs under it, it's so important to do feasibility studies. And for value-added ag enterprise development, you can very often be looking at architectural issues, engineering issues, legal or other technical issues, food safety. I would also include food safety. Anything that would prepare the project to be either shovel ready or really, you know, strongly put together and kind of locked in on many of these myriad of issues, particularly when you're trying to build a physical infrastructure that is a value-added, perhaps hub or processing plant or anything of that nature. So if you're a tribal government applicant and you're walking into this value-added space, just know that this is also one of our priority funding areas this year as well. It's so important, though, to really think about these investments that you're thinking of making in terms of how the farmers and ranchers within your community itself, within your tribe, or I would say also within the region that you may be functioning within, how are they going to interact with your infrastructure? And there's so many examples of that. A simple example is a food hub. How will individual native farmers and ranchers actually interplay or interact with this value-added infrastructure? Will you be taking their food that they produce into that infrastructure for further processing and marketing? Same could be said for a slaughter or further processing plant on the livestock side. Are you engaging native farmers and ranchers as a part of your supply chain in that entire sort of value-added infrastructure setup? So just those are a couple of examples that come to mind very quickly when you're thinking about the value-added piece, but please speak to how you're going to engage individual native farmers and ranchers. We're also looking for applications in 4 special emphasis areas. These are more fully described in the request for application itself and in the previous slide deck that we put together. So this is just a very short nod of the head to these particular areas, but just know that they're further described. So please pull those up and study the full request for application. But we have determined that these are areas where we are seeing through our survey that's been on our website since it went live in December of last year. We keep seeing these things being talked about in native media, and we receive inquiries about them, but we also have seen some survey responses of that survey, and we have that survey up all the time. So if you haven't participated in it, just please consider doing so. But these things are just keep coming up. So we felt it was important for us to determine whether there was interest by any of the applicants for funding this go around in these kind of 4 key areas. One of those is traditional foods and food sovereignty programs. What we're asking for in that particular special emphasis is applications from one of the 4 types of entities. But perhaps you've already been doing some work in traditional foods and you're ready to take it bigger, take it to more across your community. Perhaps you've done a food sovereignty analysis and you're ready to take the next step beyond that. So however you are working in or describing traditional foods work at your community, at your tribe, or food sovereignty work with your tribe, just be prepared to talk about that within your application and know that it is one of the 4 areas that we're interested in. Because hemp production was actually included as a new component in this most recent Farm Bill, and some of the restrictions around it have been released by Congress, basically. There is a lot of interest and there's a lot of talk out there about hemp production analysis. But if you actually look in our request for application, what we're asking, if this is an area that interests you, please think about applying in that area. But what we're looking for here are feasibility studies. Anytime a new type of enterprise or a new type of production system comes online, if you will, in the US, it takes a fair amount of time and a lot of ramp up to actually basically stabilize and put those new production systems in place. I would have to tell you that we're at the very beginning of that in hemp. And so making sure that if you're thinking about moving off into this particular area, that you have a solid feasibility study that supports you is really important. So please take a look at that area of special emphasis funding. We are providing a small amount of funding in that arena just to help people get those financial feasibility studies up and running. We know there's a lot around youth programming, native youth and agriculture, and really thinking about the next generation that's coming up behind us. And so we are seeking applications in the youth programming area. So just understand that there's a little bit more definition around that that's provided in the full request for applications, but youth programming is one of those 4 special emphasis area. The last special emphasis area for which we're seeking applications is things around the agricultural sciences. And this can be any wide variety of programs, including perhaps scholarship programs, but really understanding and supporting who we need as a part of our support system that sits around native farmers and ranchers and our food system work across Indian country. As much as possible, we need to kind of pepper that entire area with folks who have backgrounds in the agricultural sciences. So we're going to fund projects in these special emphasis areas for no more than $75,000 per project in the area, and just see how it goes and see what kind of interest we have across these particular areas. We have received questions in the past about whether these are going to stay in place, these kind of topic areas for all future requests for applications, and we'll have to tell you no. This is for 2019. The trustees will take a look and see what applications come in, see what maybe where there's heavy need in one area and not so heavy need in another area. All of those things will kind of go into their decision-making process for what happens in 2020. So this is just to get us rolling. And so please take it with that kind of attitude in mind. The criteria for review that we're going to, that we'll be looking at as we analyze all these applications are areas that in your narrative, when you're putting together your application, please touch on each one of these areas. Your proposed results from your actual project, what your farmer and rancher demand might be for that particular work. What does your team look like? What does your organization look like? What is the capacity level? Do you have collaborators? What do they bring to the table? The 4th area is impact on access to credit. We will be looking for each one of the projects can speak to, if possible, the impact on access to credit. Results, what kind of, how are you measuring results and what kind of metrics are you thinking about as you kind of strive for what you think the outcomes, the results might be. So a deeper discussion there about how you're going to evaluate your results. Innovation, things don't always have to be innovative. Sometimes I think by going back to our traditional foods, we are actually being innovative in some respect because we've been separated from them for so long. But innovation can be whatever you describe it to be. So just think about what sort of innovative aspects your project brings to bear on what you're trying to do. And then finally, wide application and replicability. A lot of folks think that agriculture is only place-based and it's only community-driven. But I will tell you, there's still lots of aspects of food and food access and food systems and building out value-added food infrastructure, for instance, that actually do have replicability across many, many Native communities. But just speak to that issue when you're actually doing your application. We will be evaluating each one of the applications across all of these 7 areas. There are some mandatory documents that we're going to need for you to upload into the system. Tony will be speaking to uploading later. If you ever run across any kind of glitches or problems that you might be having, just please don't hesitate to reach out for technical assistance. That's what we're here for. If it's very, very technical and we need the software developers to actually get in on the answer, then we will pull them in. So don't worry about that at all. But if you're an organization that relies on tax exempt status, for instance, you will know because you will have received a document to that effect from the IRS. So that's one of the mandatory documents. If you are, for instance, a tribal government, and you are offering a limited waiver of sovereign immunity, or your particular government requires a resolution from its governing council to actually make the decision to support an application for funding. We're not going to assume that those sorts of requirements apply across everyone, but if your applicant is controlled in that way, then you've got to indicate in a supporting mandatory document that the right authorizing representatives or tribal council, for instance, have authorized the application to be submitted. These resolutions or letters, if you will, or statements are not, we toyed with the idea of having a format, but decided not to do that because there is such wide variety in those formats. Just please describe the services that the actual applicant will provide to Native farmers and ranchers. Just give us a thumbnail sketch of what the project is all about, and then indicate in that resolution or in the letter signed by the authorizing individual or perhaps governor or chairman of the tribe or chairwoman of the tribe, a statement of the authority or approval of the applicant to apply for the funding from NAAF for the purposes intended. So if along the way you kind of stumble in this area, please, again, don't hesitate to call us. Project budgets. Every project that is submitted has to have a project budget. And we have on the website, we have references within the request for application itself, but on the website we have budget guidelines, budget template, project budget sample, project narrative sample. Those, just pull them up and study them so that when your budget is pulled together, you can really be as concise and specific as possible. What we need for you to do is reflect on your budget only the funding you're requesting from NAAF. But the required documents are on our system, so just be sure and gather that up as you're pushing towards September 30th. Include on the top of the budget and the budget narrative your organization name, your project name, and the requested grant period in months. There's separate columns that are required for year 1 and year 2. If you're only going to do a 1-year project, that's up to you. Just only fill out the column for year 1. If you are going to do a 2-year project, make sure that you really think about your budget in the context of both years. Identify in the project budget narrative the project activities that will relate to various line items in the budget requested. For instance, if you're putting together as a part of your overall project a meeting of some sort, and you've requested in your budget some meeting expenses, then indicate what the tie-in is in your narrative. Before you make a PDF, which we need you to do before you upload it into the system, don't forget to wrap the text so that all of your explanation in a single cell shows up there and isn't cut off. Believe me, I've done this enough myself. It's always one of those hand on the forehead sorts of things, but maybe someday I'll learn how to wrap text properly and not have to get help. Just remember to wrap the text so that all of your explanation in single cell shows up. Check your math in your Excel document. Make sure all of your numbers are in the columns are visible and not cut off due to formatting. If your budget runs onto more than one page, include the column headings on the second page. Just make sure that you do a final run through and give yourself enough time to make sure that your budget document itself is really all there. I don't know how else to say that. The budget categories include the following: personnel issues. And this slide gives you a sense of what we're looking for. Direct costs, meetings and travel, supplies, consultants, printing and publications. I'm not going to read this slide particularly to you, just understand that those are the general types of project budget items that we're looking for, and some guidance here on what we're looking for in that particular arena. Intermediary funds in your project budget, those can be the funds you would take from NAAF that you would then turn around and use for regranting or loans or scholarship. Be specific in that area, particularly when you're talking about the costs associated with that particular regranting, lending, or scholarship activity. Just kind of look at your own budget and budget narrative through the eyes of our team here, and try to just be as specific and not leave things up to question as much as possible. And then indirect costs. All the applicants for 2019's request for application will be limited to no more than 15% allowed indirect or administrative costs. So keep that number in mind. Again, this is for 2019 request for applications. Depending on the type of organization, some organizations have 0 to 5% indirect. Some have 50% and more. For this go around, the Board of Trustees decided that trying to stay at this cap of 15, and we'll see how it goes. That may be raised or lowered in future years based on what we hear back from you all.
So
now, Tony.
Before we turn it over to Tony Stanger McLaughlin, our regional director, to walk through the application system, thank you again to everyone who submitted questions using the question box in your GoToWebinar toolbox. If you do have a question for us, we will cover all of those at the end of this session. So please feel free to continue sending us questions for response. So Tony, feel free to take it away.
Hello everyone, my name is Tony Stanger McLaughlin and I'm from the Colville Confederated Tribes. I'm going to whip you guys through this section because many of you have already gone on. We've got a good amount of applicants coming through. We just want to make sure that once you get onto our system, you're able to complete your application. In order to reach our application, you go to our main website, and from there you will see a link on the top that says grants. That will take you to a page where you'll have 3 yellow tabs, and the middle tab says start application. You push that button and it takes you here to create an account. Once you create an account, it will move you through entering all of your demographic information, personal information, and your main point of contact. So that's this page. Next slide. Once you get in the system and you've added your email and created a password, then it will take you to this page where you can see the actual apply button. That will allow you to go on and start filling out the application questions. But please note that once you start your logon information and you put in an email, that email becomes your username. So make sure that whoever's starting this application and logging on, that username is an email is the one that you want to use throughout the application, because once it's in there, and we can't change it. We'd have to start a whole new application. So next slide. Once you get in, you'll see the application page, and it's broken down into sections. So you'll do the project services, your organizational information, applicant, projects, and then your required uploads. So depending on the amount of or the types of projects you're applying for, different areas, you could apply for just one single area, or you could apply for multiple areas. Depending on your choice, your application could be very short or very long. So just know that every section, every project has to have its own unique budget documents. So you will have one application, but you could have multiple budget documents that need to be uploaded. So pay attention to that. Next slide. When you're uploading documents, you will see an active link. It will be in blue on the left. The one that you see right now on the screen is blacked out because that was an older version and this was through our demo site, but you'll see that active link. You will click on it. It will take you to another area where you will see a template or an example. We have a few different links, but just be guided through that link that will take you where you need to go to fill out either your budget template or an example budget narrative, where you don't need to download the budget narrative. It's mainly for your educational purposes, but download the template. When you download it to your own computer, once you download it, you then fill it out. And as Janie said, make sure that you check your math and that you make sure that everything's included on that document, and you wrap your text. After you have saved that in a PDF version, you will then see a bottom link, the one that says upload file. You'll click on that and upload the template that you have just filled in. Next slide. Once you've filled out your application and submitted it, you will have a dashboard. Everyone's dashboard is a place where they can see the status of their application. And this is just an example of our demo site, what it looks like. This was my own application. But you'll continue to come back to your dashboard. And the good news is, once you get into this system, you've filled out your application, you're going to get a confirmation email that says your application has been submitted. We just sent one out yesterday that said application deadline fast approaching. So when you want to know about when we close, we'll send a notice that the application has closed, but then we'll also send information through this website, and you'll be able to view through your dashboard other information. So next slide. These are our critical dates. We opened this on August 1st, 2019. We close it on September 30th at 11:59 Central. Next slide. These are our websites. And again, Janie talked about our Q&A. We're going to update that, but we already have a really good Q&A going on that might already answer questions that you might have. So take a look at our Q&A. And if you have a unique question or you just need technical assistance, you can email us at grants@nativeamericanagriculturefund.org. We're trying our hardest to get back to you guys in a timely manner, but a lot of your questions are just very unique and they're taking longer than the 24 to 48 hours, but we're doing our best. So knowing that, please get your questions to us soon, because we can't answer your question if you send it to us at 11 p.m. on the night that grants due. Next slide. Here's our phone number. We have live assistance during the day, 8 to 4, but you can also leave a message, and that phone number is 479-445-6226. Again, 479-445-6226. Next slide. JD said we are taking paper applications. She also let you know that those paper applications have to meet the same guidelines that online applicants have to meet. And once we do get your paper application, we will be entering that information into our online system because we use this online system to do our review process. And it just helps us keep all of our records in one place. The address to send your paper application to is 534 West Research Center Boulevard, Suite 220, P.O. Box 1427, Fayetteville, Arkansas 72701. Those must be submitted by September 30th. If you want us to send you a paper application, we can do that, but you have to let us know right away because it's going to come in snail mail. If you want to just print those yourselves, you can go to our main website. Again, go to grants and you will see a PDF version of all of the questions that you would see if you were applying online. Next slide. So I'm going to just quickly, before I turn it back over to Q&A for Janie, I'm going to let you know that we had a couple technical things come up recently and we fixed those. One of those being that we had the support letters tab, because there's a section where you enter support letters. We had that as a required document. Anytime you see an asterisk, a little star above your question, that means that it's a required question and you cannot submit your application unless you've answered all required questions. That in our RFA, that is an option. You do not have to have support letters. So we changed that question. So if that pertained to you and you are having issues submitting your application, just want to let you know that we fixed that so you can go ahead and submit your document or know that you don't have to submit a support letter at this time. We also had an issue where people were trying to upload their eligibility document and they couldn't see the link to add that. We fixed that. So now you'll see that link for eligibility on the very end of your application. So now we're going to hand it back over to Josiah and Janie and Sandy, and we'll start our Q&A. Good luck with your applications, everyone. Don't forget September 30th.
So thank you, Tony. Before we delve into the Q&A session, just a couple of quick notes. The first is that this webinar session is being recorded. As with the previous webinars, it is our intention to have this available on our website at nativeamericanagriculturefund.org/grants by the next business day. So the second is, as a reminder, we welcome and encourage you to send in your questions to us through a variety of means. We'll be walking through questions in this webinar session that are submitted through the question box in your GoToWebinar toolbar. So just to get this kicked off, the first question that we have is, does the grant allow 7871 tribal governments to apply?
We've had this question literally on every single webinar that we've done. It is included in the frequently asked questions. What I'll share with you is in the fast track application process several years back, they were functioning under a settlement agreement that ended up being slightly different than the one that actually was the final settlement agreement that led to the creation of NAAF. So what we have decided to do is we have to stick by the 4 types of eligible entities that are described very specifically in the trust agreement that you can actually read up and pull up and study off of our website. So please, whoever asked that question, chances are you're either a grant writer within a tribal government, or you may even be on council or legal counsel. So just pull that up, study the 4 types of eligible entities. You'll note 7871 is not mentioned by name, but that doesn't mean you're necessarily excluded if there is another means by which you can actually push the application in through a description of the eligible entity itself. So it seems to me that you're not going to be particularly excluded. We just don't have the liberty to call you out by 7871 because we have to stick to the 4 types of eligible entities that are in the trust agreement itself. So just be specific. If you are 7871 tribe, then just please be specific as to how you can walk in through one of the other eligible entity types.
So the next question comes with a little bit of context. So all applicants will be limited to no more than 15% allowed overhead on administration or project expenses. The lower percentage of indirect expenses are more likely to be granted, but in no circumstance shall the allowable overhead exceed 15% of the total budget funding sought. So the question is, should the applicant make subawards or subrecipients so that there is no indirect involved?
Oh, that is entirely up to you and how you design your application. Lead applicants have all sorts of levels of indirects that they've negotiated with the federal government, for instance, or they may never be in a position or seek federal funding and therefore have very limited use or hardly ever ask about their indirect costs. So we have no way of knowing what your particular situation is with entity by entity. So how you set your project up, if you're going to have subawards, we're silent on that. You are more than willing, we're more than willing to accept applications where there are subawards involved. Just understand that as to the project budget that you request from us, the limitation is 15% on indirect.
So the next question is, can you go over or clarify the waiver of sovereign immunity?
Same sort of situation applies there. The trust agreement is very specific. We are required to receive from state or federally recognized tribal governments a limited waiver of sovereign immunity for their in order for them to receive funding from NAAF. So we have literally no flexibility with regard to that requirement. However, we also decided early on in this particular application process, and perhaps this will change later, we're not going to require that you fill out a form that we design. You need to tell us through properly recognized authorities at your tribal government that the limited waiver of sovereign immunity will be granted. We know that it takes a bit of time to get those kind of locked into place, and so we're willing to work with you on that. But you're going to have to submit with your application some indication that you will comply with that component of the trust agreement itself, because basically we have no flexibility to do anything other than require a limited waiver. That's taking the long way to actually say that we have no particular letter format or protocol that you are required to follow. If your tribe, has a very simple process of whereby those can be delivered, then use that process. If you require more lead time, or you have a very elaborate process by which your tribal government grants that sort of authority, then you will be held to following your own protocol. But there's just no way for us to have predetermined what that would look like. It will be required before the funds can be released.
Does this funding only go to ag projects?
Well, this is the Native American Agriculture Fund. So yes, if you actually look at each one of the descriptions for each one of our priority areas of funding, as well as each one of our special emphasis area of funding, we talk about the needs of Native American farmers and ranchers and tribes within every context in agriculture. So I think we had maybe one question in one of the early webinars about whether the funds can be used for housing, just general housing purposes, and our answer on that was no. That's not what this fund was designed or created to do. It came out of a long litigation, the Keep Eagle litigation, that involved native farmers and ranchers and agriculture. And so that's what we're all about, and we will stay true to that. So yes, it is all about agriculture.
Can applicants submit more than one application?
That is, again, entirely up to you. If you choose to do that, you're welcome to do that. If you want to participate in another applicant's application, it's okay with us for you to do that. You can combine your applications. We would actually, if you're going to take the lead and be the lead applicant or maybe the sole applicant on 4 different things, we would prefer that you just go ahead and submit one application and dissect your application according to what you're going after. I hope that makes sense. We would want you to do the same on the budget. So if you're going to make a decision to make it easier on yourself and just push send once, then please do, but indicate in your application itself that you're combining basically multiple narratives and multiple budget requests across, more than one topic area.
What was the per project limit to value-added projects?
I believe that was 75,000 because we very much are focused on the feasibility issues and those kind of technical components that sit under solid value-added projects.
So we touched on this question in one of your previous responses, but is it possible to write a grant for 2 of the focus areas, particularly number 1, feasibility and market analysis studies, and number 3, analysis of transportation, testing, self-regulation, and tribal government regulatory needs? And this would be for the hemp analysis portion.
Again, I think this goes back to, can we do separate applications or combination? We will accept it both ways.
So in the RFA, it states a mandatory resolution from the Board of Trustees. In the webinar, you mentioned that a letter from the authorizing authority is okay. So our president for this organization is authorized by the Board of Trustees to submit proposals. Will a letter from that organization's president be sufficient?
It sounds to me like you may have 2, if I understood the question correctly, there may be 2 layers, that you have a Board of Trustees that authorizes the president of the organization to actually submit. The way I would actually structure your letter, I would indicate that the president is authorized by board action on X date, yada, yada, yada. And I would also, just to be on the safe side, include a copy of the resolution as an attachment to the letter. That way you've got both bases covered if there's any questions.
So if an applicant is requesting a 2-year grant for one of the special areas like agriculture sciences, is the limit $75,000 in total or up to $150,000 if it's over 2 years?
The limit is 75.
So
for 2 years or 75 for 1 year.
What will be used as a proven track record of services to Native American farmers and ranchers? Is this for the lead applicant, or will the collective record of the lead and partners be considered?
This is a very important question, I think. It matters who your lead is. If you're, for instance, some folks may not be 501c3s, but may have a fiscal sponsor who is a 501c3 but does not have a track record of service to Native farmers and ranchers. But the new entity, which doesn't have 501c3 status yet, has years of experience in that space. I would have to tell you that choose your lead well, but be specific. If your fiscal sponsor, for instance, cannot honestly say that they have much of a track record in that area, then you need to really talk about the depth of the track record of the entity that the fiscal sponsor is there to help. So just, I think in this area particularly, I think it's so important to talk about who brings what to the table and how any weaknesses, for instance, in track record with native farmers and ranchers is going to be overcome. And I will tell you, there's a lot of organizations out there that are native-led organizations that maybe have no experience with farming and ranching. And they may need to partner with an entity that has a lot more experience in farming and ranching kind of writ large. So I think the key thing that I would do here is really think critically about how you're going to explain the engagement that either the lead or a significant player has in this space. But I will tell you, I've also seen applicants, in other jobs that I've had, where the lead has no experience in farming and ranching, but they bury the participating organization that really has all of the background and all of the information and knows the audience. And the way I say bury is they don't give them much budget to work with, but they just have them there in name only. Understand that is something that's usually pretty obvious. And I wouldn't believe that you would actually have the right combination there. But there's no way to pre-answer this question. It really depends on each one of you as the applicant to really think through who your partners are, what they bring to the table. Is their position in the actual project equivalent to what they should have in the budget and in terms of their responsibility? And at the end of the day, do you have the right team assembled who really knows native farmers and ranchers and can really drive into their needs very quickly and importantly? Hope that helps.
So is there a place in the online portal to attach documentation proving the eligible entity status? For the purpose of this applicant, it would be proving that they are an educational institution, or is that proof verified later?
Tony, I think, she's still on. But if you're an educational organization under that, or back in that slide, it talks about that particular section of the Internal Revenue Code. Most educational organizations that meet one of the descriptive terms in that section of the Internal Revenue Code likely have a letter indicating that they are that they have achieved some accreditation status or are organized under that particular law as an educational organization. They usually have some kind of letter proof of that in their regular files because they are likely applying for grants and need to from more than one location and have to prove it up. So if you are a part of an organization and you're coming in that door, I would ask whoever maintains the records for that particular organization if they have some letter that can prove that up. A letter from an accrediting organization would do, a letter from the IRS would do. If you can't lay your hands on it, then you should substitute, at least at the application juncture, a signed letter from the senior authorizing official that's authorized to sign grant documents or grant applications or your budgets. And I would include that if we find when the application comes in and it's vetted and you are in line to receive funding, then we will get with you to provide further documentation should we need it. But at the end of the day, what we need you to do in the application process itself by September 30th is to have some indication of proof of your educational organization status and type.
And does character, in quotations, mean one word or a letter?
That's a Tony question.
It sounds like it's in reference to support letters are leaders within the organization. Is that correct, Josiah?
So this is just what the question entails. It may be helpful for the asker to provide more clarification, and we will continue to respond to that question as it comes in.
I think though, Josiah and Tony, I think what it's actually referring to is where we have character limitations in the boxes.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
it's everything. It's periods, spaces, like apostrophes.
So lose some spaces if you are concerned about exceeding your character.
Yeah, put an and symbol instead of writing and. Same with
Right.
instead of spelling out your numbers, just put numbers.
Yeah, there's all sorts of ways to cut through the character limitations and still get stuff in. But sometimes in my past, I've exceeded the character limitation, and then I go back through and edit and try to be more succinct and really do what you just suggest, Tony, which is replace the and, the ampersand on your keyboard with spelling out and. But those are, little tips that you can really, this is why it's so important to start doing your application now, because you can really make your life a lot easier if you don't try to do all of this editing and character limitation and not exceeding that right at the last minute. It's always better to just be able to have those things worked out ahead of time. Anyway, I think we have the answer to that one.
Does NAAF require proof of Title III Native Serving Non-Tribal Institution status?
Yes. Yeah. There are certain categories of educational organizations that have achieved Native Serving Institution status. That is normally through percentage of Native students within your student body. That normally comes through some sort of notification process through the entity that recognizes those institutions. So yes, we would need a copy of that.
The next question reads on page 9 under a note. It states that individuals who wait until the deadline, in quotes, risk running out of time to modify or improve their application. Now, if an applicant submits early, will the NAAF team provide feedback that can be incorporated into the narrative before that application is reviewed?
Not at this juncture, no. Keep in mind, folks, that we're 2 weeks out, thereabouts, from, or less than 2 weeks, actually. Any ability that we have had or might have had in the past over the last 6 weeks has really come down to these last few days. And so I'm not sure that anybody's even asked us to provide any sort of review or pre-review. We haven't done that at all. So no, we will not be doing it this go around because mainly we're just too close to the deadline.
Is an early January 2020 start date feasible?
Yes. Absolutely. In fact, we would love it if they started as early in January as possible. And I will make a note on that. We are doing our level best to make all determinations before the end of the year, and then to proceed to get final documents in place with the hopes that we can send funding for this first year for the project, and have it all culminate by the end of this year or the first of next year. So we will be working night and day to do that, obviously, but that is our goal, and we're really hoping that everyone can have an early January start date. If for some reason that we cannot control things, slip on that for a couple of weeks, then we'll adjust whatever you say in your stuff. So if you put in your application the start date of January 1, we're going to do our best to comply with that. But at the end of the day, we all may mutually agree to start at a later date. But the goal is January 1.
Are stipends for Native participants an allowable expense, such as $500 for a week-long conference?
Yes, Just explain it in your budget, put it in your budget narrative, put how you're going to determine that. If it's just an arbitrary amount, just let us know. We just need descriptions of that in your actual budget and budget narrative.
So this interested applicant is not pursuing youth programming funds, but would like to include wages for a youth day camp in lieu of providing childcare for participants in the training. Is that allowable?
To me, wages would be in your personnel costs. So how you determine wages is up to you. But, you know, keep in mind that you have to also comply with labor laws when you're actually employing people. So we're not going to presume to make any kind of speculation about that right now. But what you said to me described sounds like just standard wages for student workers, basically. I may not understand the question. Be specific in the actual budget narrative.
Can an applicant pay room and board for participants in a residential 8-day training?
I think that's entirely up to you and how you want to structure your project and your project budget, but there's nothing that would prohibit that from happening, no.
So, can an interested applicant save their application as they work on it and then go back?
Tony's still on, but I believe, Tony, the answer to that is yes. I think we already have applications in the system that are saved and not fully submitted. So, Tony, do you want to comment on that at all?
Yes, you can go back, and again, as Janie said, it automatically saves. Once you submit your application, we have to go in to the software program. It's called Foundant, and we have to get technical servicing from them in order to reopen it. So it's just an extra step. But yes, even if you submit it, we can redact it. It is more complicated. So before you submit, please go through all your sections and make sure you have everything you need.
But the system does save as you go too. So
yep, it saves. Yeah, it saves as you go, and whenever you close out of your browser, it saves. So there is no save button because it automatically saves for you.
Great.
So this person asks, personnel costs are different from labor costs. Does an applicant include personnel costs in the indirect 15% calculation?
You know, every organization that has indirects is either governed by the federal standards for determining indirects, or you are determining them on your own. And most of the time, I have seen indirects include, how do I say this? I don't want to say it in a rude. They don't include key personnel. They include folks in the business office who help transact documents or who help pay bills or things of that nature. But they don't include project folks who have key components of your project delivery. They are the support staff that sits around what you do. Those are what's normally, in terms of personnel issues, incorporated into an indirect cost negotiation that ends up in an amount. So if you're structuring your application, you need to consider how what your organization has included within their indirect negotiations that have come out with, at the end of the day, a negotiated rate. And you need to consider how much money you're going to seek in this application for actual personnel that are going to be having key roles in the actual process, as opposed to just processing paperwork. That's the way I have always considered structuring my budgets when I applied for funds. And I would never include a key player in the project delivery someone who is in administrative support staff. I hope this helps. If you got further questions, then just, email us using the grants at nativeamericanagriculturefund.org, and we're glad to dig deeper if you need it.
So, does converting from pasture land to cropland qualify as a value-added infrastructure?
Value added can have a lot of different components. Sometimes value added, for instance, if you were to apply for funding through the USDA Rural Development Value Added Producer Grant Program, it is likely that you could actually use conversion costs, as you described, as proving up that what you're doing is value adding. Sometimes funding, I've seen funding through that particular program at USDA actually speak to developing marketing plans or developing new labels for products that you're going to add value to. So value added is one of those areas. It's almost like agritourism. It's so broad that it can be just about anything. But if you're actually converting from hay to or other forage to food crops, then you may actually, depending on your production systems, be actually adding value. So what you need to do in your application is to be very specific about where your production systems are now and where they are going and why, and how that is going to actually add value to your food system, whatever you have in place. So I would just err on the side of being very descriptive and very specific.
So as we move forward, again, we welcome the opportunity to answer your questions. So if there's a topic that hasn't been addressed so far, we encourage you to submit that question in the question box on your GoToWebinar toolbox. So the next question is, what are some examples of types of capital expenditures?
I think I'm going to punt on that till later. Capital expenditures is normally, for our purposes, not brick and mortar. Brick and mortar projects can be quite expensive, and that's not what the focus is of our particular project this go around. But capital expenditures can also mean, in some circles, according to some definitions, key pieces of equipment for a particular project. Not the brick and mortar, but the equipment that goes in the brick and mortar. So that capital expenditure is so project driven that's about the best explanation I can give to you now. We're really not focusing on structure building right now. What we are focused on would be something that would be like equipment, but not brick and mortar.
So this next question speaks to the eligibility of nonprofits. The organizations must serve Native farmers and ranchers, and the interested applicant will need to seek to reflect the percentage of a larger portfolio of activities that are focused solely on the needs of Native farmers and ranchers. Is NAAF looking for, or the Native American Agriculture Fund, excuse me, looking for a certain percentage? Is there a number in which that threshold of the application won't be considered?
No, we're not asking for a particular percentage, but it is important for you to be descriptive. If you have a $1 million, 501c3 operating budget, but only $10,000 per year is spent solely on Native farmers and ranchers, then you're going to answer those kinds of questions in a much different way than if 25 to 30 to 40% of your overall project efforts in your entity were focused on Native farming and ranching. What we're trying to get to the point here is it's very, very important for us to fund projects that drive straight to the heart of what Native farmers and ranchers need. And we We did not prescribe a certain level of percentages. We felt that that would just surface up in the normal process of a request for application. But please know that if we get 100 applications in and the overall portfolio for your particular application is 5% native farming and ranching, then it's going to read differently to an evaluator than something that is much higher. We're trying to drive into the space of folks who can really help native farmers and ranchers.
So this next question talks to budgets. If an interested applicant includes multiple projects, but they are also requesting funds to cover the cost of one FTE to deliver multiple projects, does that applicant need to reach 100% time for the FTE? They go on to state that the reason for this question is because some of the FTE's time may not be covered by grant dollars, but may be covered by the interested applicant's admin funding. The position may become responsible for coordinating ag-related activities in the future to better align programs internally and strategically with their external partners.
We are not prescribing that if you come in with a combined approach that it all equals one FTE's 100% of their time. That's not what we're seeking at all. It is entirely your call as to how you parse out the time of your particular FTE. It's important for us to understand, though, that the folks you have working on the project delivery itself have enough time to actually do the project well and are not overly committed and pulled in a million different directions. So I would just be very specific in my budget and in my budget narrative about how that one person is going to divide their time, because what you may do if you're not careful is you may actually talk about things in such a way that it appears that your lead person is only going to focus on one aspect, and you're going to divide their cost up across multiple approaches, but you only are talking about one thing that they're doing, and it'll look pretty strange when it's analyzed at the end of the day as to whether they actually are providing the necessary time to provide the leadership across multiple areas. So just be very specific and really think about how you present that kind of information with a critical eye.
Can NAAF grant funds be used to attend training for hedging, futures trading for the native farmers? As an example, this interested applicant was a cooperative that's created by native farmers who own allotments, will be involved in issuing common stock.
One of the things that I am seeing more and more and more, and I'm on every listserv around agriculture that you can possibly think of, I'm seeing a lot more 501c3s and organizations that are really doing a lot of food systems work and improving food and agricultural activities, getting into a greater understanding of forward contracting and hedging and futures. But I will tell you that your personnel on the project, you really need to make the case in your budget narrative that you're going to set aside a piece of the budget for them to actually gain that advanced knowledge. But then please turn around and tell us how they're going to share that knowledge with the farmers and ranchers you work with, because that's going to be the real key, is not for you to just go gather up that knowledge and keep it to yourself, but really push it out to the farmers and ranchers that you work with. And so that's what I would do. We haven't prohibited you from attending, conferences or trainings that would further your capacity to deliver better information to native farmers and ranchers. In fact, I think we would encourage that, but just really talk about how you're then going to turn around and help the native farmers and ranchers you work with. I hope that answers that question. Great question, though.
The next question is looking to clarify the special project budgets. So one of the slides that was discussed earlier indicated that the Native American Agriculture Fund is only distributing $500,000 for all 4 special project areas, and each grant would be limited to $75,000. Is this amount divided evenly among the qualifying entities? The reader thought that, in looking at the RFA, the amount for each eligible grant entity, tribes, educational institutions, CDFIs, and nonprofits, was going to be $2 million each.
I think you need to read the request for applications one more time. And if you've got any specific questions about how we've stratified those, just give us a holler. It's pretty self-explanatory how we've set aside funds for each particular topic area. And we have, I think, been very specific about the upper limit for each application that we entertain in that particular topic area. So I'm not going to read the app. I think we've gone over this if you're just joining today's webinar and you've never joined one of the other webinars, I encourage you to go back and look at the full slide deck. I did not use all of those slides that were related to each one of the priority areas. I just used the cut down version on those. So please kind of look at those side by side with the request for application itself and one of the previous full slide decks. They're all right there on our website. If you still got a question, give me a holler. But it's pretty specifically laid out.
How are funds awarded? Through cost reimbursement, quarterly advances?
Here's what we're going to do. If your project is selected for funding, then we'll then move into the final negotiation of an agreement between you all and us. We will have to tailor those somewhat based on what your project actually is proposing to do. How long your project is. Is it 1 year or is it a 2-year project? Does it have demarcation components? We intend to release initial funds to you and then and likely do another periodic release on down the line. But what we need to know is which applications obviously will be funded, and then that will be the determining answer to this particular question. We are going to require reporting from each one of the applications that we decide to fund. And so the reporting will outline how frequently we need your reports in and when further funds will be released. So I hope that answers your question. Some of the answer of that is going to differ project by project based on what it is you're doing.
So as we continue to read through these, again, we encourage you to submit your questions or requests for clarification to the question box and the GoToWebinar toolbar.
Before you read the next question, I want to make sure that I make the point, and it's actually been a question in every single webinar we've had, but I'm not sure it's going to come up in this one. So I did want to make the point. These funds are not federal funds. The settlement funds for the Keats Eagles lawsuit left the federal treasury back in 2011. And so the funds that make up the Native American Agriculture Fund are not federal funds. And so I just want everyone to kind of keep that in mind, because if you are a successful applicant, then you could, what you're doing in this particular project may end up being able to be used as a match for other federal resources that could prohibit the use of federal funds for matching federal funds. So just think of it that way, but these are not federal funds. And just keep in mind, just keep that in the back of your mind. Don't know whether it'll come up today.
Do organizations need to provide proof of their approved indirect rate, such as a letter from their cognizant agency?
That would be, yes, that would be great. Not all organizations are going to have that, but if you have it, please, yes.
So this next question asks, is the purchase of land allowable?
I think that, we have not specifically prohibited that in this particular request for applications, but I think any applicant who proposes to buy land is going to have to make the case within their application how that land purchase is actually going to benefit native farmers and ranchers that you're going to be working with. You're going to have some organizations that might want to do a land purchase are going to have a hard time saying that that land purchase is going to be accessible to every native farmer or rancher that they're working with. Or, there's just so many, I think if you're contemplating doing that as a part of your budget narrative and project, you're going to have to be very, very specific about how it's going to benefit native farmers and ranchers, because that's going to be important.
So looking at the next question in our list, and please again keep those questions coming, but returning to indirect cost, is NAAF saying that salaries for key personnel are considered a direct cost?
Personnel costs are in a separate budget category on our budget forms than direct costs. I hope that answers your question.
So we encourage, as I've mentioned before, if you have any further questions, please feel free to send those in the question toolbar.
I think that we have no more questions at this point in time. Is that right, Josiah?
Yes.
Okay, we're going to leave the line open for just a few more minutes to see if any other questions come in. But this is the last call for questions. I think we've hit every one of them that we've received. So we'll give it a few more seconds.
There is a question that just came in, so thank you.
Great.
So would supporting education, training, and health and food sciences, such as a dietitian career track qualify? For this interested applicant, one of their programs already links to traditional food programs with healthy diets.
Here's one of we actually, I think, have received this question numerous times. If you're actually proposing a project that sits solely in health, then there are lots of other applications that you can submit to other grant sources. I think you would have a lot of difficulty in making the case that your project that would provide education for dietitians, if I understand that correctly, would have a direct benefit to native farmers or ranchers, or provide them assistance in technical support, business assistance, advocacy, or agricultural education. Normally within educational institutions, nutrition and health, it might be located within a college of agriculture and be kind of a related allied science, if you will, but it's literally not normally seen as a fundamental component of agriculture, particularly as it relates to items like access to credit or business assistance. So just be very careful. Applications that are solely sitting within dietary and health issues, we're not asking for those as a part of this 2019 request for applications. Those areas that are around food sovereignty and traditional foods have the ability, I think, to make the case that they are closer to agricultural production and food systems improvement than something that is just 100% dietary nutrition and health. That may not be the answer you wanted to hear, but it really drives us. We have to keep reminding folks that the purpose of these funds is agriculture support.
So the next question that we have is, can an intermediary nonprofit, not a CDFI, provide loans to native farmers and ranchers?
We would have to actually have you more fully describe how you would have the necessary infrastructure in your organization to actually provide loans. Loans are areas that are controlled by federal and state laws particularly. And I think you'd have to really make the argument that you start to look and act like a CDFI. The CDFI pieces of this NAAF puzzle in the trust agreement were very specific to those types of lending institutions. So I would really need to know more information about how your organization is set up to actually even legally provide loans.
So as we are looking through those questions, if there are any questions that haven't been addressed here so far, or if there's an area where we said we might need a little bit more clarification to be helpful in answering, again, please feel free to give us a call at 479-445-6226. Our phone number once more is 479-445-6226. That line is open and ready Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Central Time.
I do want to go back to that previous question one last time, because it is possible for 501c3s to actually do lending, but normally when 501c3 organizations actually have that as an arm of their activity, it is very specifically laid out in their organizing documents, and they have lots of controls that sit around that activity. I think you've got to really explain how long you've been doing it and what kind of infrastructure you have that would support a loan activity. It's not impossible to do, but at the end of the day, the 501c3s that I know that do lending actually are very sophisticated in that particular function. I hope that makes sense. But let us know if you got any further questions around that. I think unless we have some additional questions, which we don't, then I think we've gone through this. And if you find in these last couple of weeks or less than 2 weeks that you've got lingering things you really want to pose to us, please get them into us as soon as you can. Pick up the phone and call us. We'll get back with you as quickly as possible. But please note September 30th at 11:59 p.m. Central Time on your calendar, and get into the system as soon as you can and get your application started. We're very much looking forward to receiving all the applications, and based on some of the questions that we've been receiving, we're excited to have the opportunity to go over those. And I think we'll just close out now. I don't think we have anything else to add.
Well,
thank y'all.
Thank you everyone for your time.